If you're a millennial, let me be one of the first to tell you congratulations, as you are actually set to become a part of the richest generation that's existed throughout history. If you're a baby boomer listening to this, how much planning have you done from an estate perspective? How well prepared are you to be able to inherit a massive amount of wealth at one time? Your money doesn't go away when you're gone. If you're a millennial, let me be one of the first to tell you congratulations, as you are actually set to become a part of the richest generation that's existed throughout history. However, how well prepared are you to be a part of that generation and participate in this massive influx of wealth that you are set to inherit over the next couple of decades? Let's spend some time talking about it in this video. It's interesting because older generations typically perceive millennials as being spendthrifts, not very good with money. The term that's used in this article that I found on Yahoo, where I got this topic from, talks about specifically avocado toast and how that's kind of become a symbol somewhat for the frivolity, if you will, of the spending habits of many millennials that are out there. I don't want to certainly paint all millennials with the same brush because I don't think that's fair by any means. You're going to see people in every single generation that are going to be pretty bad with money. But it's interesting because there is some truth to the fact that there have been less savings within that generation than previous generations before them. They tended to be a little bit more interested in spending money on some of those frivolous things, more specifically, not necessarily avocado toast, but experiences, right? Travel, experiences, things that they're going to remember more so on trying to save money, especially maybe trying to save money for a deposit on a home or something like that. Retirement plans definitely weren't necessarily saved to the same degree as maybe some of the generations prior to them. With that being said, there is absolute truth to the fact that about $90 trillion in wealth is set to change hands over the next 2 decades. As the silent generation, or what's left of them anyway, the baby boomers start to pass away over the next 2 decades. And the millennials are going to be the generation that's going to benefit the absolute most from that transfer of wealth, to the tune of about, once again, $90 trillion set to change hands. I don't know how well prepared millennials are to inherit most of that, but that's definitely what I want to explore in this video, and something that definitely I want to share with boomers specifically, and talk to you about some of the things that we share with our clients as well in regards to how they should be discussing money with their family members and those that are set to receive their inheritances after they pass away. You know, it's interesting because Salvatore Buscemi, who's the co-founder and managing partner of Brahman Partners, he believes millennials are extremely ill-prepared to manage this wealth. He argues that by the time that they do inherit, they'll be in their 40s and typically lack the drive to start new businesses or even just invest wisely because of the financial habits that they grew up. He points out millennials typically haven't been pushed to develop the same necessary financial skills. They never developed the skill sets earlier because they never had to. They were never really pushed. Part of that might be due to baby boomers being a little bit more coddling, right, of their kids, baby boomers and Gen Xers, more so than the silent generation was. But they were never really pushed from a financial standpoint to kind of earn their keep, as it were. And as people age, they generally become less inclined to learn new skills, which poses a significant hurdle for a number of millennials as far as, you know, being able to advance in their careers. Once again, this is what he's saying. This is not necessarily what I'm saying myself. It is important to note that millennials are a product of their history, just like every generation that came before them. When you think about what millennials grew up with and what they've lived through at the time that they mostly graduated college, left school, and kind of entered into the working world, well, one of the first things that they had to face was the Great Recession in 08-09. That'll definitely change your view of the security of the economy and how secure you think some of your retirement savings might be for the long term. Many entered the job market during this time, impacted their earnings significantly. They've also had to contend with the massive amounts of student loans that they've been paying off, in some cases for decades. They've seen housing costs go through the roof since the Great Recession, so it's become enormously more difficult to save up for that down payment for even a starter home in a lot of cases. We're talking about rising living expenses, and we've all seen what's happened with inflation over the last few years, how out of control that it's gotten, and still not really completely gone. All of these things have come together to shape their attitudes around finances and money. And once again, this goes to, if you've not really been able to manage and build your own wealth, how well prepared are you to be able to inherit a massive amount of wealth at one time. So when it comes to those things, it's also important to note that millennials are living paycheck to paycheck more so than any other generation that's currently out there. So what do we want to do about it? How do we address this problem? And how can we best prepare the millennials or the younger generation to be able to inherit and be responsible with this influx of wealth that they are set to receive? A lot of this is going to fall on the baby boomers and the Gen Xers, quite frankly. It's their responsibility to, one, be helping to prepare their kids and their grandkids to understand what it is that they're going to receive and how best to handle it once that they do. Especially when you look at older generations, there tends to be, and I have to deal with this with my clients from time to time quite a bit, that tends to be a taboo subject. Money is not really something that you talk about around the dinner table. Okay, what your parents earned and how much money they have in the bank is really of no concern to the kids. And I mentioned before there was that after effect from, the silent generation was very tough on their kids, but baby boomers, because of that toughness that they received, tended to go the opposite direction. When they were tending to raise millennial kids, they tended to be not quite nearly as tough. That had an effect on the way that they manage their finances. They haven't necessarily had to want or strive to achieve a number of different things. And once again, I am painting a little bit with a broad brush, but when you look at the data for that generation, that typically is what holds true. So what is it incumbent on baby boomers and the silent generation to do to best prepare the next generation to receive and be responsible with the money that they are about to inherit? It's interesting because most of that generation, or most of those older generations, typically look at money as a pretty taboo subject. They don't really talk about how much money you make. They don't talk about that stuff around the dinner table. They don't talk about how much money they have, how much money that they've saved, what they're worth. It's interesting because so many of our clients are like this. They're kind of the millionaire next door, right? They walk in, you'd pass them on the street. They're not very flashy. You would never guess how much money that they had, which is a fantastic thing. And most of these people are absolutely wonderful people. Of course, our clients are included in that, right? But all that to say is that has their kids not really getting a full grasp of what they are set to receive. So it's very, very important as baby boomers get older that they are discussing with their kids and having an informed conversation around what those kids are set to inherit. It's also interesting because most people want to plan, or maybe don't want to necessarily plan too terribly far ahead. And some folks even have the attitude where they just want the last check to bounce on the way out, right? The reality is that doesn't happen for most people, especially if you're a client of ours. What we see more often than not, if you're putting together a responsible income plan and you're living according to that plan, yes, we absolutely want you to go spend that money and live life and enjoy your retirement. But all that to say, if we're doing our job on the front end, then you're going to have money left on the back end. And you need to help prepare your kids or your beneficiaries for how best to receive that money and what their options are going to look like. Some of those conversations, and we love to include younger family members in those conversations as we can start to kind of put that plan in place well in advance of us having to try to piece these things together on the back end. Because after clients pass away, obviously money becomes a much touchier subject. And if not everyone is on the same page with understanding where the money is going to go, where it's going to come from, how it needs to be split up, and how it needs to be inherited, that will tend to cause a lot of confusion. And we don't want confusion at a time when you really should be spending your time grieving. What we want you focused on when you're dealing with the loss of a loved one, especially if we're talking about parents in this case, is we want you to be able to grieve. We want you to be able to focus on the grief, focus on your family, focus on the things that matter. The money will take care of itself, but we don't want that to necessarily be a concern, and we don't want that to be the focus. So if you understand where the money is going to be coming from, in some cases, maybe best prepared during your lifetime for your kids to receive it in the form of gifts. If you're a baby boomer listening to this, how much planning have you done from an estate perspective? Have you put together your wills? Have you put together your trusts? Have you talked to your family about what you want from a medical perspective to be done? From a financial perspective, what you want done? And most people have not. And it's dramatically important that as you age, you start to have those discussions and you elect maybe even powers of attorney to be in place if in the event you become incapacitated in any way, there is someone who is able to step in and make decisions on your behalf. However, if you're going to elect someone to be a POA, it's also important that that POA understands where everything is at. And it's important for them to be included in those conversations, and we love to have them be a part of the conversations in our office even. But it's very, very important that your kids understand, maybe not specifics, but at least to some degree, what might be coming to them and how they can inherit it. If all their money is in an IRA, for example, that is all going to be 100% taxable upon inheritance. So sometimes involving your kids kids. And these conversations can help them to more efficiently receive their inheritance if we can start having discussions around how much money the kids are making. Usually when these millennials are going to be set to inherit all of this money during this $90 trillion wealth transfer that is set to take place over the next couple of decades, well, most of the time, these millennials are going to be receiving their inheritances at a time when they're actually making the most money that they've ever made before. So if they start receiving massive amounts of money that are sitting in 401ks and IRAs that are going to be fully taxable, they might end up paying a higher tax rate than what you might have been able to pay in your lifetime with a little bit of planning ahead. Because at the end of the day, Uncle Sam might even be taking more money from your kids than maybe they would have if you had just gone ahead and paid some of that tax while you were still alive. This is why we talk so much about planning ahead, looking forward. Okay, that doesn't necessarily just mean during your lifetime. It also means after you're gone. Your money doesn't go away when you're gone. Your money is still around. Your money still serves a purpose. Now, what that purpose is needs to be directly dictated by you while you're still here during the planning stages. We need to plan. We need to prepare for the eventuality. Everyone knows at the end of the day where we're going to end up. And when we're 6 feet under, we need to have a plan in place for the things that we are going to leave behind, because we want to do it efficiently. We want to do it easily. That's why it's incumbent, once again, on baby boomers to take their responsibility and inform their kids. Once again, maybe they don't need to get too terribly specific, but they need to make sure that their kids are a part of the planning process to as great a degree as they possibly can be. Because then you can talk to them about the things that you want to happen with your money. You can even start to put plans in place to help them understand the best ways to go spend money and how to be responsible with money. Because if we have a generation that's never really had that much money to themselves and they've been living paycheck to paycheck, if you're the millionaire next door and your kids are set to receive, let's say, $1-2 million at the drop of a hat, that money could go very quickly. We've all seen it. We've all heard the horror stories around inheritance that go up in smoke. And that's why trust planning can be so vital, even if your kids are responsible and even if you think your kids will do the right thing. If you put your money in a trust and you can maybe put some guardrails around it, you can ensure a much longer legacy that you're able to leave. Not only for your kids, but also your grandkids and your great-grandkids. That's a really, really cool legacy to be able to leave for your family. But if you're not having those conversations on the front end while you're still alive, this article about how millennials are the least prepared generation to be able to inherit all of this money, that will come true if they're not having these conversations ahead of time and they're not prepared for the massive influx of money that they are set to receive. If you are a baby boomer, make sure you're having those conversations. We always encourage it in our office. We love having those conversations because it really, once again, we talk about family wealth planning. This is the central core tenet of doing that planning well in advance and involving the entire family in some of those conversations. At the end of the day, I really don't think millennials are that ill prepared. I think obviously this article is being a little bit dramatic with its headline and the way that it's framing this story. There are a lot of wonderful millennials out there, of course, so I'm certainly not painting millennials with a broad brush here. Really, I'm putting the onus more on baby boomers in this instance. I think they need to be having open conversations with their family, with their kids, with their beneficiaries around how much money that they truly are set to inherit from a realistic standpoint. Be open about it. Transparency is a very good thing. It doesn't, once again, have to be down to the dollar, but start setting some expectations early. And then that way, when your kids are having to make decisions around money leading up to and prior to your passing away, that will help inform some of the decisions that they have to make. And you can even involve yourself maybe perhaps in some of those decisions when it comes to maybe saving money for your grandkids' college. Don't put the onus entirely on your kids. Maybe that's something that you can involve yourself with while you're still alive, talking about spending your inheritance and helping with your inheritance while you're still alive. So you can maybe even see the fruits of some of that money come to life and watch your family benefit from this money that's just sitting in some nest egg that they might receive 10, 20, 25 years down the road. Maybe they can benefit from it a little bit more today than they will then. But every plan is personal. Everyone's going to have something different that they want to do. Everyone's going to have different goals that they want to achieve, and everyone's going to have different thoughts about the way that they want to pass on their wealth. All we know is there's a massive amount of wealth that is set to take place, that is set to transfer over the next couple of decades. You need to be prepared for that transfer of wealth. And that's not only incumbent on millennials or Gen Xers or whatever generation is set to receive it. It's not only incumbent on them to be good stewards with their money. It is incumbent on you as the person who has accumulated this wealth to set the next generation up for success to the greatest degree that you possibly can.